It started this morning with that drone attack in Jordan that killed 3 U.S. soldiers and injured dozens more as the war between Israel and Hamas continues to reverberate throughout the Middle East.
This morning, NBC News is learning new details about how the incident may have unfolded. One of the theories mentioned by Pentagon officials is that the attack drone was not recognized as a threat by defense systems that were in place because it flew in at the same time as a U.S. drone. The other theory is that it was flying too low to be spotted. The Department of Defense has revealed the identities of the 3 soldiers killed in the attack. In his first public event since being hospitalized, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin expressed condolences for their deaths.
Let me start with my outrage and sorrow for the death of 3 brave U.S. troops in Jordan and for the other troops who were wounded. The President and I will not tolerate attack on U.S. forces, and we will take all necessary actions to defend the U.S. and our troops.
In a few moments, we're going to hear from senior fellow and military expert at Defense Priorities and host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube, retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis. But let's begin with NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba. So, Monica, we now know the identities of the 3 soldiers who were killed in this attack. What can you tell us about them?
Yeah, we are learning more details about these 3 service members, Joe and Savannah. We know the 3 of them were from an Army Reserve unit based out of Georgia. I can tell you their names: Sergeant William Jerome Rivers, Specialist Kennedy LaDon Sanders, and Specialist Brianna Alexandria Moffitt. And we are learning just a little bit more information about some of the injuries here as well, because in addition to these 3 lives that were tragically lost, initially we thought there were something like 30 troops in addition who were injured. That number has gone up to about 40, and several of them were critically injured, we understand. And the big question always with attacks like this is whether there are traumatic brain injuries and things like that, that they still need to transfer some troops to other locations and facilities to try to see more information as they continue to recover.
Monica, just a second ago, we mentioned this theory being touted by Pentagon officials about how this attack may have even happened, how this drone went essentially undetected. What more can you tell us about that, and any other preliminary details being shared about what exactly happened?
Yeah, the Pentagon is still working through some of this information, and they do say that the air defense capabilities for the facility where these troops were stationed was working. But what seems to have happened is it's possible that the attack drone was mistaken for an American drone that was returning to what's known as Tower 22, that facility you're seeing on your screen there. And so that could have been a possible mix-up, or by the time they realized that it wasn't an American asset, it was too late. There's another theory potentially here as well, that it was flying so low that it was difficult to detect it at the time that they needed to. And that is why, and this really happened while troops were sleeping still in their beds. They had no idea really, or any warning, of course, that this was coming.
So, Monica, do we have any more clarity on what kind of response the Biden administration is considering to this attack?
We know that they are weighing a lot of different options, and this is always a situation where the U.S. doesn't want to give any kind of an advance warning or hint as to what it will be, but the president was very clear that there will be a response, and we know that likely it's something that could be something that includes multiple phases. It's something that could be, online or in cyberspace, in addition to something that's more kinetic in terms of any kind of counterstrike. It's something that could take some time as well. Here's a little more from the White House on the range of options, while they don't want to say too much at this point.
There's no easy answer here, and that's why the president is meeting with his national security team, weighing the options before him. We are not looking for a war with Iran. We are not seeking a conflict with the regime in a military way. And as I said in the opening, we're not looking to escalate here. This attack over the weekend was escalatory. Make no mistake about it. And it requires a response.
So the U.S. does know that, of course, this attack was perpetrated by Iranian-backed militia proxy groups, in effect. But the U.S. said yesterday, when pressed on this at the White House, that it doesn't seem that there are going to be actual attacks and retaliation inside of Iran. That doesn't seem to be something that right now is the plan, because, of course, that would likely widen this conflict and this war. So we're talking about likely something else In the region, though, we all know, as you're going to discuss, there are also this potential talks for a hostage deal and everything else that's going on with the Israel-Hamas war. So all of that has to be taken into context when making these critical decisions. Joe and Savannah.
We'll get into more on that in just a second. Monica Alba, thank you so much.
Yes, thanks, Monica. Let's now bring in Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis. Good to have you with us this morning, as always. So as we mentioned, these different theories cited by Pentagon officials about how this potentially happened, one of which being that the drone was not recognized because it came in at the same time as this U.S. drone. How easy is it to misidentify these drones? Do these Iranian-backed groups have drones with similar capabilities to those of the United States where it could be confusing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to understand that the air defense capacity of these really tiny little outposts that we have scattered throughout Iraq and Syria is not anywhere near like what you see with the, some of these Patriot anti-aircraft systems that cover bases, large bases like Bagram in Afghanistan back in the day, those kinds of things. So it's a lot less capable. But it is supposed to be, to handle small-scale things like rockets, the small-scale rockets, and certainly drones. But if the enemy is able to, figure out how we operate our what they call TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures, and they watch enough and they reconnaissance the target enough, they can see, like if. For example, if that drone comes in at a certain time every day, or if it comes in at a certain path, then they can say, hey, let's try to mimic that and come in there. Because, look, let's don't underestimate the enemy. They're very bright and they're very smart, and they can figure out ways to defeat our sources. And as this was the 165th, I think they said, attack, they've got a lot of experience at finding out what doesn't work.
So we don't yet know how the Biden administration is going to respond, but we do know is that it's not looking for war with Iran. But we have seen calls from Republicans like Senator Lindsey Graham to attack Tehran. Just how do you think the U.S. is going to respond here?
Yeah, I think that Biden is going to be very, he's going to try to thread the needle, so to speak. He can't just launch another pinprick attack, because none of the ones that we've launched since October have had any deterrent effect, whether it's in the Red Sea or those against our troops in the Middle East there. So he's got to go with something bigger. But look, we need to be sober about this. This is not going to stop. If he goes with a large target array, if he has this over multiple days, which many sources I'm hearing tell me that's the likely outcome, then that's still not going to change anything. And it's still going to leave our troops at risk, and the threat to them is going to remain high, which is why I say the smartest thing to do is to withdraw our troops from there and get them from those isolated places where they don't have as much defense to larger areas where they do have a lot more defense, which will not negate our security at all, which won't limit our options for security throughout the region, but it will limit our vulnerability. And I think that is key to doing.
We've talked so much since this conflict began about the concern of it broadening and certainly the concern of the U.S. being dragged in a more material way. Did this escalate it enough, or this could be an event where we really start to see that?
Without question, we are on the edge. And certainly President Biden is coming under enormous pressure to strike inside of Iran. There are so many people who have been really angry about this, whether it's retired generals, it's members of Congress that are really pressing to do this and trying to say, oh, Biden's weak if he doesn't do this. Biden has to do what's smart and wise, not what's emotionally satisfying in the moment, because American troops have been killed. So there is a lot of requirement for the president to defend us. And so he must go after the people that physically did this, whether that's Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq or this is Islamic resistance group that took responsibility. He does have to take them out, but he cannot do it in such a way that expands the war, and especially if that includes Iran. And that just makes it very difficult.
All right, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, thank you so much.
This morning, we're learning new details surrounding a possible deal to secure the release of hostages in Gaza. It comes as new allegations surface about the October 7th Hamas terror attack on Israel and intelligence alleging that some UN relief workers were involved. NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Andrea Mitchell has the details.
Stunning allegations that at least 12 UN employees helped carry out the October 7th Hamas terror attacks. 2 Israeli intelligence dossiers reviewed by NBC News accusing some staff of the UN Relief and Works Agency, including an elementary school teacher and a social worker, of kidnapping hostages and procuring weapons for Hamas. One dossier alleging 10% of the agency's staff belonged to Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and linking half of its 12,000 employees to the terror groups. NBC News has not confirmed the allegations. The UN fired the accused employees, and the U.S. and others stopped sending money to the agency pending an investigation. I asked Qatar's prime minister about Israel's allegations.
It cannot be punished because of the act of some employees as long as they are complying with their...
including kidnapping a woman, according to the allegation?
We don't know about the allegation yet until the investigation come out yet.
Meanwhile, we've learned details about a proposed new hostage deal spy chiefs from the U.S., Egypt, Qatar, and Israel agreed to this weekend. It calls for a halt in fighting for 60 days, the release of all civilian hostages, women first, in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. After a month, Hamas would release women IDF soldiers, then male IDF soldiers, as Israel releases the rest of the Palestinian prisoners, thousands of them.
Good progress made to get things back in shape and to at least to lay a foundation. We don't know and we cannot predict what Hamas' response will be.
Also, they are parents of American hostages, including 19-year-old Itay Khan.
The hostages cannot be collateral damage. They need to come out. Then you could do whatever you want.
Our thanks to Andrea Mitchell for that report. Secretary of State Antony Blinken called the proposed hostage deal strong and compelling, while Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's spokesman says nothing has been agreed to.
Well, Attorney General Merrick Garland will undergo surgery this weekend, according to a Justice Department spokesperson. Garland, who is 71 years old, will transfer power to Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco during the procedure and as he recovers from anesthesia. He's expected to return to work the following week. The surgery is to treat spinal stenosis. That's a narrowing of spaces in the vertebrae. Garland is intentionally giving public notice before the surgery in the wake of the criticism that Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin drew after failing to disclose his hospitalization for prostate cancer surgery.
Later today, members of the Republican-led House Homeland Security Committee are meeting. They're considering the proposed articles of impeachment against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas.
On Monday, Democratic House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries called it a political stunt and a hit job. It comes after months of consistent criticism from the GOP towards Mayorkas' border policies. They say that Mayorkas failed to uphold the law and has breached the public's trust.
NBC News congressional correspondent Julie Sirkin joins us now with the latest on this. So, Julie, explain to us how this is going to play out in the committee today.
Well, this is going to be the first time in 150 years where a cabinet official is staring down the possibility of being impeached by the House. That's what Republicans on the House Homeland Security Committee plan to do to Alejandro Mayorkas, the border chief for the administration this morning, getting in the room at around 10 a.m. in a hearing that could last several hours. They're going to mark up these two articles you just saw on your screen. If that is approved out of the committee, which the chairman, Mark Green, thinks they will be, that then goes to the full House for a vote. That vote has not yet been set, but the earliest we could see it happen, guys, is next week. The question is for Speaker Mike Johnson and his leadership team, do they have the votes to even make this happen? There are a handful of Republicans who have previously said they're not sure if they want to go down this route. They're not sure if Mayorkas' actions qualify being impeached. But if the House does approve this and sends it over to the Senate, that's controlled by Democrats, and more than certainly they're going to acquit Mayorkas at the end. So really, this is a political proceeding for Republicans in the House.
Julie, a deal to restrict migrants from crossing the border into the U.S. also remains in limbo this morning. How are Democrats responding to that fact, as well as you say, what could unfold here should he be impeached, what that means that they're going to do?
Well, this is super interesting because not only is Mayorkas being impeached by House Republicans, but he is the very person the administration had put in the room with those bipartisan Senate negotiators to try and fix the problems at the border that Republicans are impeaching Mayorkas for. So this is really a political pretzel that Republicans have put themselves in. Democrats, though, grasping at this. You played a little bit. You referenced what Jeffries, the Democratic leader, had said in the beginning. He called this a hit job. He called this a political stunt. Those are words being echoed by other Democrats, including Benny Thompson, the ranking member on the Homeland Security Committee. They think this is nothing more than a political stunt. Mayorkas himself, though, responding to these impeachment proceedings this morning in a statement to Mark Green, the chairman of the committee, saying in part, quote, "Whatever proceedings you initiate, however baseless, my responsiveness to oversight requests will not waver. I assure you that your false accusations do not rattle me and do not divert me from law enforcement and broader public service to which I remain devoted."
So let's look at what we saw in the New Hampshire primary. We saw 30% of Republican voters viewing immigration as the biggest issue in America. It's a big issue for Republicans. It's a big issue for former President Trump, which seems to be impacting some of these negotiations. So with that in mind, where do the negotiations stand on the deal? What are some of the obstacles in the way of getting that deal done?
Well, certainly Trump is a big obstacle, not one that they didn't expect, though. Negotiators wanted to finish this process up at the end of last year for a reason, because the second you get into an election year, you have Trump on the campaign trail railing against this deal. He doesn't want it done. He sees, of course, the border issue as one of his top political jabs that he can throw against President Biden, who he's likely to face in November at the ballot box. And so, of course, Trump is a big factor. Speaker Johnson is certainly listening to him. The hardline Republicans in the House are too, but that doesn't mean the Senate is not going to move forward. In fact, we have some new reporting this morning with my colleagues on what's in this proposal. They are really getting down to the finish line to give Biden and any future administration new enforcement mechanisms at the border, some really conservative border measures that Republicans have called for years and years. So we'll see if the Senate can get it out this week. We'll see if they can vote on it. And then Speaker Johnson certainly has a big decision to make.
All right. Julie Sirkin, thank you so much.
Well, the former IRS contractor who leaked the tax records of former President Trump, Jeff Bezos, and Elon Musk to the media has been sentenced to 5 years in prison, and he must pay a $5,000 fine.
Last October, Charles Littlejohn pleaded guilty to one count of disclosure of tax return and return information. Prosecutors say Littlejohn abused his position within the IRS by disclosing thousands of wealthy Americans' federal tax returns. They say he, quote, weaponized his access to unmasked taxpayer data to further his personal political agenda.
Over the weekend, a cyber attack hit government servers in Fulton County, Georgia, impacting the office of District Attorney Fani Willis, who is prosecuting the Georgia election interference case against former President Trump. NBC News senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen is here with the latest for us. John, good morning. Great to have you with us. So tell us what happened here. How big of an impact did the cyber attack have there, as well as throughout the whole county?
Yeah, good morning, Dream Team. We don't know a ton about this cyber attack, in part because officials are still, I think, trying to figure out what happened. Certainly, they have not said everything that they might say about what happened. It is not clear entirely whether this case against Donald Trump is affected in any way. What authorities in Georgia are saying, according to our colleague Blaine Alexander, who did great reporting here, is that they are not aware at this point of any sensitive information about citizens that has been compromised, and Fani Willis's office has not said anything at all. They're declining to comment. So I think we may have to just take a breath here and pause and see what comes out of all the searches that they're doing to make sure that nothing was retrieved or misappropriated.
To be clear, John, you are a third of the Dream Team. All right, let's talk about the state of the race here. Former President Trump held rallies in Las Vegas ahead of the next caucus. That one's just a week away. Tell us what he's focusing now that the Republican field is narrowing. It's one-on-one, basically, with him and Nikki Haley, and also now that President Biden is ramping up his campaign efforts.
You know, for the entirety of this campaign, Donald Trump has been trying to pivot to a race against Joe Biden for two reasons. Number one, to try to actually get a jump on that, because Biden doesn't have, competition that's likely to defeat him, but also to try to signal to Republican voters and Republican donors and others that they should stop helping other candidates. At the moment, Trump is focused on beating the heck out of Nikki Haley in her home state of South Carolina, trying to wrap up the nomination, not just be sort of the shadow presumptive nominee, but actually move into that phase where he can compete in the general election.
And John, let's talk about the latest with Nikki Haley. She's raised $4 million since last week's New Hampshire primary, where she finished second and said she was going to hang in there. Of course, the race has now turned to her home state, South Carolina. And it kind of sounds like she's starting to temper expectations in that primary that'll happen next month. What's her message been?
Yeah, her message is that she could continue to come in second place and somehow win the nomination. And that's at odds with reality. What she keeps saying is, that basically she just needs a good performance in South Carolina. When she's asked, Kristen Welker on Meet the Press this past weekend asked her to name a state basically where she could win, and she didn't do that. That's not a good sign for the Haley campaign. The money that you mentioned is a good sign for her. It means that she's continuing to have money to make the plane fly, as they say. and to continue to be able to campaign. But it's also not a jaw-dropping amount of money. You say $4 million in a week. You know, that's good enough to keep campaigning, but you know, the top campaigns would be drawing $1 million a day at this point.
All right, John, thanks so much for joining us again this morning. We appreciate it. Convicted murderer Alex Murdaugh won't get a new trial. Yesterday, a judge in South Carolina denied the disgraced attorney's request for a retrial. His lawyer had argued that court clerk Becky Hill tampered with the jury and tainted the verdict. Hill denied those allegations. The judge heard from Hill and all 12 jurors in the trial before issuing her ruling in the one-day hearing. She found that while Hill was, quote, not completely credible as a witness, that the jurors were not persuaded by her actions. Murdaugh is currently serving 2 life sentences for the murders of his wife and youngest son.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.